And then we're going on live on Facebook. And I'm hoping that it will all connect the way it's supposed to. Oh God, did it do the thing? Go live on Facebook, would you? That sounds great. We're only 2 minutes late. It's fine. It's not a big deal.
I've been later than that for lives before.
I believe it. All the technological stuff that can go on. It's funny, there's like this interesting delay that happens. So I need to like put it over the screen that I see with you so that I don't get confused.
Mm-hmm.
Now, will you put it on like a watch party on your Facebook page? You do
I don't
that?
know how to do that.
So when I did it, I just did like a share, and then it can say like start a Facebook watch thing if you want to. If you don't want to, that's also totally fine.
We'll talk about it after.
Sounds great. Thank you for your patience in working with me.
No, I just don't want us to be in the middle of that conversation when it goes live.
I think it's a preview. It's giving a preview, so I have to hit go live first. So the title, what do you want the title to be?
Oh, I don't know. What is this series called?
Just it's just like resources that I'm doing, like different activities for people. So I've just been telling people that it's like a trauma, like an activity with a base in trauma and codependency.
You could just call it trauma, resources, and info.
Sure.
Well, it's not really resources. Trauma, healing, ideas. Something like that.
Trauma, healing, ideas. Okay. Is that okay? Suddenly can't hear you. That's weird.
Oh, well, that's because I'm not talking.
Oh, I thought, see, this is the problem. It's the delay thing. Okay, we're going to go live. I'm going to hit the button. And I think that I need to, yeah, we'll figure it out. It'll be fun. Going live. I hit the button. We'll see how long it takes it to actually go live. And it's like over your face. So like I could only see your face on, broadcast webinar in Zoom, setting up your meeting for Facebook Live. It's thinking all the joys of technology. Dun, 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 dun.
Well, on my end, it says it's live streaming on Facebook now.
Hey, look at that. There's a play button. It says that we're live, but there's a play button over it. Isn't that interesting? Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are working together to transcend the experience of technology in today's age.
Yes, absolutely.
So welcome, and thank you so much for your patience since we're 5 minutes late. And thank you so much to Vanessa Grace for being here with me today and being willing to present this just wonderful resource to our communities, getting to do a trauma healing activity. And so Vanessa is a life coach and a counselor who works with women and a lot on. Do you work with men too? Or it's like, is it both and it's just primarily women?
It's women.
It's just women.
It's
Okay.
just women, yeah.
It's just, she just works with women and working through codependency issues and in trauma, which there's little T trauma and there's the big T trauma, and there's just so much going on with protests. And gosh, I feel like domestic violence is probably on the rise with stuff with COVID and people being at home more. Have you seen that more?
Well, I haven't been specifically tracking that, but I totally believe that is true, because when people are under stress, their best self doesn't always come out.
Yeah.
And so situations that were already volatile are probably worse. So yeah, I totally believe that it's on the rise,
Yeah. It's
just because of my knowledge of that area.
yeah, so hopefully the resource that that you're offering us here today will be able to serve some people, and it's not always out in
Yeah.
the light, and just giving people safe space in their homes to be able to have the opportunity to dive a little bit more into that. And then also we'll be posting her information so that you can find her on Instagram and her Soul Amplified podcasts, which are fantastic, and just all the different services that she offers so that you can have additional support as needed in the future, or any additional questions that you have.
Well, thank you so much for being willing to share that with everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
welcome. It's nice to get to build a resource library. So this is being recorded and we'll post it on my YouTube channel through Horsepower Empowerment Through Connection. And that will be great. And then over time, we'll just slowly continue to build with more and more providers around the world. We're going to have somebody from Boulder, Colorado that's going to be on the show offering some free resources. We've got somebody from London that's going to be popping on with some breath work. I just talked to somebody in Brisbane, Australia last night, and he's really excited to get to hop on here and talk about addiction. He's an addiction life coach and offer some things up here. So I'm really excited and so incredibly grateful to the people that are stepping into this space and being willing to share their time freely with people. It's a big deal. So thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. It is a really big deal. There's so much that everyone can get out of just working on themselves, and then being able to use these resources, other professionals to share it along. So it's really a big deal.
Yeah. And thank you, Joshua, thank you so much for your support. It's like Joshua's like, go you. I'm like, yay. Let's make the world a better place together. It takes all of us. There's a lot of people out there struggling. We've all been there. To one degree or another. All right, Vanessa, where would you like to start?
I was thinking about this. There's so many places to start. I almost couldn't decide. But so I think I just want to share that something that I learned when I was going through my own healing process, that my therapist was sharing with me when I was in group therapy and individual therapy with him. He would always say that intensity is about history. And he would say that in response when somebody had like this really big reaction that something had happened in their life. And he would say, remember, intensity is about history. And I swear to God, I wrote it on my hand one night because I couldn't remember it. I could not remember it. And so anytime that you have a reaction that you think is over the top for what happened, or that other people are telling you that wow, that was an overreaction, and it doesn't really make sense to you about why you're behaving like this, what's really happening is that you're reacting to the past. Whatever happened just now, you're reacting to it. And apparently it touched on something from the past that was sensitive. And so you're actually reacting to now, and you're reacting to then.
Yeah, it's like every event that's similar, right? It just kind of layers up like this domino effect and just increases force as it continues to push forward into your present time consciousness.
Yes. And so it's not that you're crazy. It's not that you're dramatic. It's not that you're attention seeking or whatever thing that they are saying to you. It is that you are reacting to now, and you are reacting to the past. And you probably never got to finish processing whatever it was that happened in the past. And so when it's not getting processed and dealt with and kind of shed from you, it keeps getting touched and reactivated. And the more common word that people use is triggered. But I'm trying to not use that word anymore, but that's really what I'm talking about, is it gets touched, and then it's like a nerve. It's like the nerve, it's like the last nerve, and then you go, whoa, and you go really big in whatever that way looks like for you. Maybe you curse somebody out and break a table. Maybe you sob for an hour in your room and no one can console you. It just depends on who you are. And so that is that can look like being a really emotional person or a volatile person or whatever words people use to describe that. But what's really happening is that you're activating old trauma, and old trauma exists in our nervous systems, which is maybe a new concept for people. But really everything that's ever happened to us is living in our bodies somewhere, and our nervous system remembers even if we don't, because
That's
our
really
bodies are
interesting.
built to remember it that way. And in fact, there is a process that happens when you're a baby, and it like stores everything that happened to you to basically like determine if the world is safe or unsafe, and it helps you discover this belief system. Oh, my world is safe, so I can trust. And so then you believe the world is trusting. But because it happened when you were under a year old, you don't remember why you believe that. You can't like link it back to anything, because the brain literally doesn't have the neural connections that have been built yet to help you remember why you believe that. But if you were having some experiences that weren't totally awesome, like maybe you had to cry too long to get someone to come take care of you, even just you were like little lonely baby and wanted to be hugged, but just you had to
Yeah.
cry too long to get someone to come to you, it's gonna be ingrained in your nervous system that like, you know, maybe you got to take care of yourself, because maybe people aren't going to show up for you. Like they're going to act like they love you, and you're going to act like you love them, and you sort of do, but there's always that little bit of reservedness where you're like, I don't know if I can really trust this. And
So sorry, go ahead.
that's just the first year of your life. And so all layers of that are inside of us. And yes, all of that can be healed through a million different methods that have been developed. But like you're touching against that kind of stuff when you're overreacting. So
Right.
that's just like a really simple baseline. And so now, because we've got this virus everywhere, and we've got people protesting everywhere to try and have their rights be like, let's just be treated normal and not like have all these micro reactions where people are like treating us like shit because we're a different skin color, in these like micro ways or big ways, depending. And so it's very, very stressful, and it's touching on all of the stuff that you thought that you had dealt with. And so that's just like the world around you, not even your everyday life, not even how the situation has affected you. And so everyone is all shook up, and that is why, because it's touching on everything all over the place. So now I talked for like 10 minutes probably. Question.
Oh, no, it's not that bad. Well,
Sometimes
it's
when
all
I get going,
important.
I'm like, I don't know how long I just talked for.
You're all good. It's totally fine. I was just slightly distracted because like it froze over on Facebook for a minute, and I was just like, how do I make this unfreeze over here?
That's awful. Yeah.
But it's okay though, because we're recording it. So even if it gets like all jacked up and silly on Facebook, I can just like repost it. And so we won't actually lose any information, and it'll be just fine.
Yes.
And then I feel like a lot of what you're talking about, in my mind, it touches on attachment theory.
Which what I'm talking about is totally related to attachment theory.
In this beautiful book, for anybody who has not yet read it,
you
should definitely pick it up, because it's really cool. So that's a lot of information there.
It is.
So the preface for your activity, like what is our activity looking like today?
Well, I didn't know I was doing an activity. I thought I was coming on and talking about trauma.
Oh my gosh. Confusions, they happen to the best of us, you guys.
Exactly. So what I can do is give you some ideas about how to handle situations when they come up. That's what I can do. You know what
I love about these lives is that it's just
true.
You're just like, so we're here now. And
we're here now.
This
you
happened.
kept calling it activity, and I'm like, oh, what's she gonna do? I don't know.
Clearly, I get to I get to do this thing. We get to work on our communication. So so there's these activities, these things. So for instance, when you're counseling people, you're doing life coaching, right? What would something be that you would give somebody for like take home homework, for instance, to help them with trauma? Like we could just like base it off of like have that be a little
Yeah.
jumping off point maybe.
So there's kind of several different versions. If you're having like a panic attack about something or are really, really activated, often that means that we're in our heads too much and thinking worst case scenario. And it's almost like we're in fight or flight. And so fight or flight, people often think it's like punching the wall or like getting in an actual fight. But
Yeah.
fight can also look like starting to get revved up in our minds or talking really, really fast or like walking back and forth and back and forth and back and forth or, higher heartbeat and all these different smaller indications that you're in fight. And so what you want to do is you want to bring your whole system down. You want to bring the heart rate down. You want to slow the breathing. And so it depends on like how activated it is for what kind of intervention you need to help bring that down. So for
Sure.
some people, if it's like just starting, like maybe they can engage in some basic deep breathing to help it bring down. But sometimes people go from 0 to 60 and they're like, deep breathing never works for me. Well, that's because it's kind of for down here, in my opinion. I mean, it doesn't, maybe it works for someone up there, but oftentimes people who get up here really fast, like their breathing doesn't work for me and they get mad about it. I don't want to do breathing.
I don't want to talk about it.
Exactly. So sometimes you have to like shock your system into like bringing you out of it. And so one technique that people use is putting their face in ice water.
Okay.
I know, right? That's for like up here. If you're a person who doesn't get up here, I'm not saying like I'm at 100 for yourself. I mean, like if you take a community of people and there's like the bell curve and like these are the people, actually this is average people. So this is the people, on the bell curve who get super high. In terms of like they get really, really activated and angry.
Triggered,
or,
not
really,
high like on cocaine, you guys, or
no,
marijuana.
no,
No,
like
totally
they get
different.
really intense in terms of their reaction, or they get a really big panic attack. Like that's when you take an average group of people and you're the one that tends to have a bigger reaction than everyone else in terms of your panic level or your anger level, plunging your face into some cold water can really like kind of make the system go shock it and bring it back. And so that's
Really
not
fascinating.
one that everyone's going to need. And I'm not necessarily an expert in that one, but I know that one exists.
Okay.
So then if you're feeling like you're separating from yourself and you're just kind of like not able to see what's happening, to bring yourself back to reality. Oh, actually, I'm not doing a flight or a fight one right now. I'm doing a flight one right now. Sorry, I'm switching. I was doing fight, but now I'm doing like where you feel like
That's
you're
all right.
separating from yourself.
Clearly, we get to work on our communication today. That's like part of our activity today of the grace and patience, and why we surround ourselves with good people that we can trust, that we like respect, and are held in like a safe container, so that we can just have these fun experiences.
I know. So another activity that you can do to help yourself come back to yourself if you feel like you're drifting away, which feels like separating from yourself, like you're in a room with people, but you feel really, really far away. You feel kind of floaty. If you're experiencing those kinds of feelings, that's like escapism. And there's fight and flight. There's also freeze, where you just kind of go like limp, like, I don't want to be here. So that one you need to get grounded. That one you need to get grounded so you can come back into reality. And so you look around the room and you name 5 things that you see. And so in my office, you just do it really slowly and really purposefully. You're very mindful, you're engaged. So for me, I may be like, I see my lamp right there in front of me. I see my water bottle, it's purple. I see a plate because I just had a snack after my workout. I see my bookshelves and all of my books, and I see my chair, my meditation chair. And now you've grounded yourself in looking around the room and seeing what is there in reality, and it brings you back to being centered. And even maybe just watching me do that activity was calming. And
It
it
was
like
for me. I didn't know about anybody else.
it brings you back into yourself. So you can do that for all the senses, though. You can do 5 things that you see, 4 things that you hear, 3 things that you, I don't even like,
Touch.
whatever order you want to do it in. Yeah, you just go down all the senses, and usually taste is going to be the one that you only do one with, because there's probably not anything in your mouth right now.
Hold on, let me get a
or you can just skip taste. Yeah. But so I've worked with people who I knew that doing all the other senses would overwhelm them. So like literally every time I have a therapy session, sometime in the therapy session, I do that practice with them just to help them experience it, so that they'll be more likely to do it in their everyday lives.
No, that makes sense.
And so breathing, putting your face in cold water, and trying to ground through this, seeing what's around you, are all different techniques. They all depend on what you need. They all depend on the way in which you kind of separate from yourself or get super activated and away from yourself. And that's
we use
when
that
you're
in
like
horses
in the
too.
moment. What?
We do that activity with the horses as well, the 5 senses, and going down through them to help people regulate. I just posted it on our live. I was like, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask.
Yes, definitely. That's totally awesome. I love it.
We'll see. We only have one person now. I don't know who is it? Who's the one person I don't know? You're like,
hello.
Hello.
One person who's watching live right now. And then if you're not in the middle of activation, it's really good to reflect afterwards so that you actually learn something about the situation, meaning that you, not like about the other person, because people would be like, I'm going to learn about it and tell them why they're wrong. That's not what I mean. I mean, learn about what happened so that you can do better next time. So that
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, that's what people will do. Guess what I learned
That's
what I learned from this situation. You know, that's how people react, because they get defensive and don't want to look at themselves. So there's like an afterwards activity. I always recommend journaling, where it's just like you write down everything you're thinking.
I love freeform journaling.
Yeah. And when you just follow the rabbit hole of what you're thinking about, man, I always end up going farther than I thought I would. Now, I will say this. I like to do pen and paper journaling, but that's because I was born in an analog world, and it didn't start becoming digital until I was in my teens and 20s, just because that's my age. But so I think better when I'm writing. If you think better doing this, or you think better doing this, and that's how you have stream of consciousness, that's the one that you need to do. Because the goal is to have stream of consciousness. It's not to, I have to have a journal or a notebook and write. No, do the one that makes sense for you. If you need a specific writing activity, take a piece of paper and divide it into 4. Again, this is for reflection after a specific event happens, where you cried for an hour, got super mad, had a big fight with your partner, whatever. You might want to jot on the top of this paper the date and what it was, if you want to keep it for later. If not, like, whatever, I don't care. So you write in the 4 sections: thoughts, emotions, body, behavior.
I love that you brought body into that.
Yes, the section for thoughts, you're going to write down everything that you were thinking during the event. When I have done this in session with people, they end up writing on that little square, the back of the piece of paper, and another piece of paper. Because they keep saying, well, what else were you thinking? Well, what about this? I don't just mean complete sentences. We do not think in complete sentences. We think in fragments. We think in, what the fuck was that? Like, that's a thought that you would write down.
Yeah, definitely.
And you just keep going, right? As many thoughts as you can think of, and you'll run out. And then you go to the next box, emotions. And you'll write down all the emotions that you were experiencing, and you'll run out. And then you'll go get a list of emotions, by the way, the emotions wheel, which you can just Google and you'll like find a million versions of it. It's the best thing ever. If you do nothing else from this live or this YouTube video, go download yourself and print out a version of the emotions wheel, because it will change your life.
How
To
so?
be able, because it's this wheel with, so it's got the main emotions in the middle divided like a little pie,
Okay.
like anger, sadness, happiness. And then the next ring out is like derivative emotions of anger that are more specific. So they're more specific versions of the main 5. And then there's a third ring that's even more specific ones. And so you can start in the middle and be like, well, I know I'm sad. And then you can follow and be like, well, it kind of feels like this version of sad. Well, it feels like that one. And so you get more and more specific. And so
Yeah.
I don't know how many emotions are on there, but it's got to be 100 or 200. And so
Wow.
it helps you get more proficient at identifying the label of the emotion that you're experiencing, because the more specific you can get, the more you can understand yourself.
Absolutely.
Yes. So you've done your thoughts, and now you're going to write out all the emotions that you felt. And what I like to do with people is, well, what were you thinking when you had this emotion? Now we're back to the thoughts, because they didn't realize they were thinking that. So then they add it to the thoughts. And we do that with all the emotions. What were you thinking when you had all these emotions? You write it all out. And then what were you feeling when you had all these thoughts? Oh, now there's more emotions I didn't realize I had. So we do some back and forth with that. And then we go down to body and behavior. They're strange because it sounds like the same thing, but it's not. Body is like the automatic things that your body does, whereas behavior is the things that you choose to do. So if in the event that happened, your heart rate got high, that would go under body, because that's something that your body chose to do, because that's just how it responds. If your face got flush and you put that under body. If you walked back and forth a lot and were clenching your fists like this with your hands like down by your body, you would wrote walked rapidly under behavior, clenched fists under behavior. If you talked loudly to someone, you would say talked loudly. If you then realized that while you were talking loudly, you had a thought that you hadn't written. So you go between all the 4 squares and you write everything down, and you suddenly realize all this stuff about the situation. You're like, well, I assumed that they meant this, and then that made me mad, and then they got mad at me for getting mad. And then you can see almost like the path much more clearly. And then you understand your own role in the situation. That is the goal of this, is to see your own role in the situation. We are not perfect. I am not perfect. I do not fight perfectly with my husband. Like, no, we are
And it's
not.
even like your job to life coach and counsel. What do you mean you're not perfect at how you communicate? That's
I know, right?
crazy.
I told that to my uncle, and he like interrupted me in the middle of it. He was like, wait, you do this for a living and you don't know how? And I was like, no, dear uncle, I am not perfect.
It's not about not knowing how. It's that like you're still a human, like we still get to catch ourselves when we do something. I feel like when we get into those different situations in life, it's not that they don't happen, it's how we reflect differently. It's how we analyze them later, and how at what rate we change our behavior. And life is about building habit. So you can either build positive habits or negative habits.
Yes. And very frequently, a person will do this and they'll realize something, but they won't change their behavior immediately, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
Because it'll probably take several times of being reminded that, oh, I'm doing that. Oh, I'm doing that. Oh, I'm doing that. Or I'm in that pattern, or whatever you say to yourself. It usually will take several realizations before you start going, well, what do I do instead? And then when you do the activity, you can start brainstorming what to do instead. And then maybe in the moment, you'll actually remember to do that instead. So it's not like you're going to do this activity, figure out what you did, figure out what to do differently, and the next time this exact situation happens, you're going to totally remember to do the thing you thought of. No, it's going to be like several times to realize what you were doing, several times to realize what to do differently, several times before you remember to actually do it in the moment. And that is a normal progression.
Right. And that's why grace and patience and compassion with oneself is so incredibly important, and also with other people, because we realize that we're not we struggle with this, and the people that we're struggling with are probably also struggling with some fashion of what we're struggling with, just from a different subject matter. And yeah, it's It's a lot for us all to get to process through life, and different things trigger different people. And it's really important to be able to recognize what your core needs are and if they're being met. Like if your core needs aren't being met, then you're most likely going to be triggered far more easily than if they are. And also, when you try to do this more regularly, this particular activity, which is a great activity, then people can start seeing patterns of their own behavior. And if it's in your own handwriting and you're looking at a series of events that's happened, it's a lot easier for you to humbly be able to look at that pattern and go, oh, nobody's
Mhm.
telling me what I did. I'm telling myself. And then you can start recognizing the different limiting beliefs that are coming forth from that internal tape that's going, which is where all of your, what you're writing down, what your thoughts are. And then once you can recognize what those limiting beliefs are, you can start saying, like, what's actually real, because most limiting beliefs are based out of falsehood, like these terrible stories that we've told ourselves over the years or what somebody else has told us. They're rarely based in any actual truth. But until you can recognize that that is a limiting belief and then tell yourself the truth, which is empowering, like only at that point can you start actually managing those limiting beliefs and getting rid of them and giving yourself value. Because it's really hard to be kind to yourself if you find no value within yourself.
Yeah.
And everyone has value. It's just that sometimes we forget. And we have to remind ourselves and surround ourselves with kind people that we can trust and respect and love. And so when we have those difficult moments, that people can communicate with us and have the difficult conversations to call us out and help hold us accountable and support us in a way that we can actually believe them, because they come to us with love through positive intention. I was having a conversation with somebody just this morning, and we were having a little bit of healthy conflict conversation, as between friends. When there's confusion, there sometimes is. And to be able to say that, assume positive intent. If people are in your world that don't have positive intent towards you, that's probably something you need to look at in regards to the human being that's engaging with you.
Yeah.
And if you have gotten rid of the people that you don't have to have considerations with because you have worked hard to have healthy, non-toxic relationships in your sphere, which I understand is not always possible due to like who we live with, and different stuff, and we have to create healthy boundaries to mitigate that issue. Um, we just create that, like if you have those people that you love and you respect, then we all make mistakes. But if you assume positive intent, it makes it a lot easier to have those difficult conversations and come to a much healthier place when you clear the confusions. Because typically, if you're upset with somebody, it comes from a confusion. Somebody either didn't understand how they're coming off to you, or they're dealing with a whole bunch of like issues in their own lives. And it's like their communication is coming through way harsher. And,
Mhm.
most of the time when somebody's upset, it has nothing to do with you. And it's really hard for some of us to remember that at times.
Yeah,
So,
it feels wounding.
yeah, it feels wounding because it triggers us into some of our own stuff, which in turn has nothing to do with the person in front of us oftentimes.
Mhm.
Um, so I just grace and compassion and patience and the willingness to have those uncomfortable conversations is so incredibly important. And understanding that sometimes a person is not in a space to have an uncomfortable conversation with you because they're too triggered. And you have to love and respect them enough to honor their boundaries, to give them like 10 minutes or an hour or a week to decompress from whatever that is. And honor this fact that when they're ready, they'll talk to you about what needs to be spoken. And that can be really difficult, but that's why you have a community of people. That's why you have counselors. That's why you have life coaches, so that you can have people that can dialogue with you to keep you in a healthy mindset and process it. And that's really a gift too, because when you get to a healthier space, when that person is ready to communicate with you, then you'll have a more functional dialogue with them and more effectively get to the place that you need to go to have a better relationship. So in the end, conflict is actually a good thing when dealt with properly, because it
Yes,
allows
because
you to
then you
grow.
can
Yeah,
learn and resolve and find the solution to the conflict.
Yeah, we send kids to school all the time. We're like, work on your critical thinking skills. And then we become adults. We're like, fuck that noise, though. It's fine. Like,
I
excuse
don't
my
want to have to
language, you
think
guys.
about
I
that.
apologize for any person that just offended. But seriously, it's so funny. It's just like sometimes you become an adult and they're like, critical thinking skills. What are those? Nope, nope. Purely just
Yeah.
gonna go off ego and emotion here. It's gonna be fine.
Yeah. Well, and when we get really activated emotionally, like literally our frontal cortex that does the thinking turns off.
It does. It's a
So,
scientific fact, guys. That's why,
yes,
and gals, that's why it's kind of important for us to have grace and honor the fact
yes,
there it's,
this part turns off, the part
yeah,
that does the thinking about how we think thinking is.
yeah.
Yep.
Neuro,
Midbrain and lower brain take over.
yeah, the brain.
Yep. Can we circle back around to something that you mentioned at the very beginning?
No. Yes, of course we can,
No.
Vanessa.
Okay. It's just because when you were talking about it, I was like, I know something and I want to share it.
Yes,
Or
please
have
share it with
something.
us.
So you were mentioning domestic violence, and that's probably on the rise.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to share that on my Instagram, kind of near the beginning of all of this shelter in place stuff, I had done an Instagram live on safety planning. And safety planning is something that social workers do with people when they're in a dangerous living situation. And I didn't specifically do mine on domestic violence. I did it on living with a toxic person, because you could be in a toxic situation, but it wouldn't necessarily be domestic violence where like abuse is happening, like physical abuse. And so that's on my Instagram, which is at Soul Amplified. I'm gonna try and look up how long ago it was. I feel like it was in April, but the reality is I'm not 100% sure.
So I have a clarifying question that you may or may not have the answer to.
Okay.
So I think that oftentimes when people think of domestic violence, they put it solely in the category of physical abuse. But I feel
No.
like emotional abuse is definitely like can be sometimes even more impactful than physical abuse. I don't know
So
what your
there's
thoughts are on all of that. It's like such, yeah,
yeah.
clarifying question.
So I actually did, so I have a master's degree in social work, and I did my internship for my master's degree at a place that was doing research on domestic violence, essentially.
Okay.
So I happened to have more knowledge of that and worked in a domestic violence shelter. So, and have like purposely tried to maintain understanding of that. So there's the physical abuse, there is sexual abuse, there is the emotional abuse, there is psychological abuse. They might not be different, but I kind of think of the emotional abuse as like insults, but I feel like the psychological abuse is like
Manipulation.
playing tricks, like gaslighting.
Yeah.
Like something happens and then the abuser tells the abusee, well, that didn't happen. Why are you remembering it that way? That never occurred. Or setting
Yeah.
up a situation where there will be failure. Like
Some
here,
people don't know what gaslighting is. Can you just briefly say that? And then when we're done with this, we do have a question
okay.
on live. But this is a
So
very important topic. So let's.
yeah, gaslighting is where the abuser makes the abusee feel like their reality isn't real. And so they like might insinuate or explain to them like, no, that person didn't behave that way because of this reason, they did it because of this reason, or that person actually doesn't really like you and this is why. Or they'll say things to third parties to make them not trust the abused person. And so basically anything that can happen to deconstruct the abused person's perception of reality and make them question their own sanity and reality. So
Constant
gaslighting is
undermining.
really intense,
Yeah.
and really, really destructive.
Yeah.
And then there's financial abuse, where you take away a person's access to finances, or you take away a person's access to their legal documents, such as like a driver's license, passport, birth certificate. For people who are trans, taking away their documents proving that they've switched their gender in all these different ways, or taking away legal documents if they're in the middle of, if anybody is in the middle of a legal thing, taking away documents that help with insurance stuff. So there's all these different ways where they can take away access to documents that like freeze their ability to make progress in their life. But some of these documents also like freeze their ability to escape.
Yeah.
How are you supposed to leave if you don't have a driver's license? How are you supposed to leave if you don't have your birth certificate or your social security card?
Yeah.
And then there's like the relational stuff that happens in terms of removing the abused person very slowly from all of their relationships and shoving away all their friends and all their family so that it's just the abused person and any children that they have and the abuser. And so now they're isolated, they don't have their documents, and they're experiencing physical, sexual, and psychological abuse. What is that person? Like, I'm painting a really awful picture.
I mean, but there are people out there that are experiencing things like that. And there are also people out there that don't necessarily, they just justify a lot of things. They don't understand that the situation that they're in is actually considered abusive. So,
right. So you could not be having sexual abuse. You could not be having physical abuse, but you could be getting gaslit. You could have them emotionally abusing you. You could have your finances controlled by them very tightly. Maybe you have all of your paperwork and your documents and your driver's license, but you don't have any of your private relationships that you had before the relationship. That would still be considered domestic violence because it's about controlling you and being in power over you, not taking your needs into consideration, except when you're in the part of the cycle where they're in apology mode. So there's like a whole cycle to it, and I don't remember the exact names of each cycle or each piece of the cycle, but it's like the abuse happens, and then there's, you know, the abuser is sorry and expresses deep sorrow, and maybe they'll like lavish you with everything you've ever wanted.
Yeah.
And then there's a period of everything being good. And then it starts to go downhill again. And then the extreme abuse happens. And it just keeps going like this. And this section of that wheel is why people stay. Because it's so good when it's good. And they keep thinking that this part is what, well, we're going to end up here and be here all the time. And maybe some of here. But they don't do any of, they're not doing the little sheet that I just showed you guys. The abuser isn't working on themselves to become better. They say they're working on themselves, which is not the same. Anyway, so the live that I did on safety planning for living with a toxic person is March 31st. If you want to go look at it.
March 31st podcast for safety plan. So what it's under?
Yeah, it's safety planning. And it's not on the podcast, it's on the Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the feed. No, just so you have it.
No, I'm writing it in the comments.
Oh, okay.
So that somebody can have it. So we do have a question here from Steven. He wants to know, is there a way to refocus that part that turns off so suddenly? LOL. Give us skills. Come on, Vanessa. Okay. Give us something. People have expectations.
That's not going to happen in the moment initially. What you have to do is in the in-between times when that part isn't turning off, when that part's still on, you have to do the work. You have to read the books. You have to listen to the podcasts. You have to do the journaling. You have to do the self-evaluation. And so then you begin to deal with the issues that caused you to get so activated. And it's usually icky stuff that you don't want to look at, or it's stuff that you're like, well, that's in the past. Why does it matter? Well, everything that ever happened to you is inside of you. And until you heal it, it's going to run the show. And so if you're getting activated where this is turning off and throwing away the key, because there's people who black out and don't remember how mad they got and break a lamp or something worse. Like if that's what's happening, your past is actually the reason why that's happening. And so when your frontal lobe is turned on, you have to do the self-evaluation, and then slowly that will come down. You're getting that mad that fast because you have so much in your past to get that mad about. It's valid anger. It's just coming out at the wrong person at the wrong time. You're pissed about something in the past. And so
How do
discovering
they keep themselves and other people like safe in that moment when you get to such an escalated space? I mean, I guess unless they're just going to know that they have to put their whole face in like a bucket of ice, right? That's our solution, guys
well,
and gals.
there's
So
more
just in
solutions
case.
than that. There's more solutions than that.
There
And I would
is.
not call
I mean,
myself an
the
anger
ice packs
specialist.
work. Is that good enough? You're like, I don't have time to like put all the ice from the freezer into a bucket. Like, but I have an ice pack.
Literally go to the sink and get a splash of cold water. Like just run the faucet and splash, you know?
Ah.
If you can't.
I'm sorry. I'm having technological issues over here.
Oh,
Don't mind
okay.
me. You keep talking.
Okay. So you have to look at what's happening in your whole life, not just in this moment, but in the past. And you have to go to look at the past to understand why there's so many emotions about the past. And you may take a while to build trust with somebody if you go to a therapist. It may take a while to build trust with them to actually be to be willing to talk about the real stuff. I've had people who have worked with me for a year or two, and we were doing good work, but it took a year or two before they actually said the thing. And I was like, I said this in my head. I didn't say this out loud to them. I
What?
thought, this is the reason why they are here.
I wish we could have like a TV show about like just what happens in therapist brains while they're listening to their clients sometimes, because I feel like we could like literally turn it into a drinking game.
I feel like that's a pretty good drinking. You know, if someone hasn't done it, please do it.
So that when the therapists can all get together.
Exactly. I
Because they
actually
need to
had,
have self-care and decompression time too, because
yes.
you know, care fatigue is a thing, right?
What did you say?
Like oh gosh, I feel like I'm my brain is not saying it correctly. Like caregiving fatigue, basically.
Oh, yes. I just didn't hear the word caregiving. That's all. That's why I like
Let's
it.
not go there.
I didn't hear what you were saying. Yes, caregiving fatigue is a thing, and it's based on self-care issues and saying yes too much and continuing to give without refilling your own cup. So was it Stephen who had the question?
Stephen did have the question.
Okay. So Stephen, I think it's really important if your front brain turns off and you've been unkind to somebody, you need to make sure that you admit what you have done to them and apologize and say you're going to work on it and then actually do it, which is really, really hard to do. Maybe pick the easiest person to do that with. Maybe imagine playing that out in your head to practice doing it. It takes a lot to swallow your pride and do that. I might be really embarrassing that you've acted that way, but that will help you take ownership over your own behavior and help you commit to making examinations of yourself and like what happened in your history to cause those big reactions to happen.
And how could he support somebody else who like he's been the recipient of somebody else's escalated behavior? Like how could he help facilitate that person getting into a better space, as well as having the healthy boundaries so he doesn't become like at effect of the energetic like whiplash of somebody that's engaging in life that way?
So helping the other person, really the first question is that is that other person open to adjusting themselves? Are they open to change at all? If they're not open to change and are totally closed off, you might passively make some suggestions or whatever, but you can't be attached to them changing because we cannot change other people, which is incredibly painful
At times.
and then really going into and then for yourself really going into an understanding that you cannot sacrifice your own life and your own self to force them to get better and fix them for them.
You mean like when many people out there have a tendency to try and like they see people, they're really empathetic sort of people, and they just have so much care and they want other people to have a good experience. So they just try and do everything they can to fix or help to support that individual. And then if it doesn't work, then it's it's hard for people, or they exhaust themselves trying to be there for
Yeah.
another person.
Yes. Like, oh,
Let
well, I tried this and this didn't work. So I'm going to keep trying and I'll find another way to help them and another way to help them. And they keep finding new ways to help the other person. But
Yeah,
is
like
the other
he said,
person,
sorry to interrupt. He said it's
no,
more from the point of view of being the receiver of such behavior of front brain turning off, sadly, LOL, and caregiving fatigue.
okay, okay. So that's really about recognizing that the other person has to be in charge of themselves
Giving
and
them
that you
autonomy
can't
and
you can't
responsibility.
force them to change. They may want to change, they may say they want to change, but then don't take action to do that. There's something called the stages of change, um, which is a whole 15-minute speech in and of itself. So jot down stages of change. There's an episode on that on my podcast, the Soul Amplified podcast, where I go into it for like a half hour, but you can also just Google it to get the basic stages. And that will help you see where you are at in your own stage of change and where this other person is, where you're like the recipient of them turning their brain off, and behaving however they behave. And you can see what stage they're in, because you'll think that they're in a farther stage than they are sometimes, because their words say they're farther, but their actions actually put them earlier on in the willingness to change. So you have to look at their behavior, not their words, because oftentimes they won't match up. And then it's really, really important to do self-care. What do you really need? And what are you willing to put up with, is starting to say, you can't treat me like that. And there's a lot of different ways to say you can't treat me like that. So that's like, we're basically talking about working on codependent behavior, which is actually my entire career right now. So I could talk to you for 50 hours about this answer. So my answer is go listen to my podcast.
I was gonna say, I'm like, we need to sleep eventually. I mean, I'm very grateful for the people that have like woven in and out of this podcast, and for Stephen sticking with us for the whole time. Thank you, Stephen. I so appreciate you.
Yes.
And codependency is, yeah, there's so much to unpack there. Could you talk a little bit about codependency, like the definition? And I feel like a lot of people don't really understand the breadth of what codependency is. I know you
Yes.
could talk for 50 hours on it, but could you give us kind of like a general overview and maybe just one little nugget?
Yes, I can do it short. So codependency is often misunderstood to mean that you are dependent on another person. I think the word codependency is a very inaccurate word for what it's attempting to describe. So let's start there. It's
I know I
not what it
struggled with
sounds
that.
like. It's
Yeah.
not what it sounds like at all. It encompasses being a people pleaser. It encompasses being an overhelper. It encompasses being an enabler, where you are doing things for other people that they could do for themselves, therefore preventing them from growing and learning how to doing it on their own. It encompasses having issues with self-esteem and feeling like you have to earn your worth. And so you sacrifice things that you want for yourself to provide for others in whatever way they need to like earn your place at the table for the relationship. Not like earn your place at the table for a job, like I'm working really hard to move up in the company. I don't mean that. I mean, like, you're sacrificing admitting what you really want, so that, because you think if the other person knows what you want, they're not going to be willing to be around you. And I've said a lot of things, and you might be like, well, I only feel like I'm one of those. I'm not all of those. That could still be codependency. You don't have to have all of them to be exhibiting codependent behaviors and patterns. You could have just a little bit here and a lot here. And everybody's combination is different. I have codependency in my history and have pretty much healed it, but still see it in myself, and then go, oh, I'm thinking something codependent, blah, 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 do my little process, don't behave that way, and then not have that thing come out of my mouth. Like, I stop it before it becomes a word or a behavior. And so there's so many different ways that codependency can be expressed and what it looks like in a person's life. There's not just one way for it to be expressed. And so people can get confused, like, well, so they're doing that and they're doing that and they're doing that, and those are three totally different things. How is that all codependency? Because you're looking at the root of what is underneath it. Like, here is the behaviors, but it all links back to this one thing, which is I have to make sure that someone is taken care of and that I'm loved, and I have to earn my place. So that is my really, really short definition of codependency.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. It's really interesting as I've been learning more about attachment theory and codependency and all these things, coming to the realization, humbly in difficulty, that there have been so many times in my life that I was really codependent. And I've always thought of myself as a highly independent, like lone wolf sort of person, and to be willing to say like, oh no, there's a lot over there, was a really big and beautiful step for me to take in my process, which I'm grateful that I'm in a space that I can take a look at that. I was like, wow, so much more makes sense now.
Mm-hmm.
That's the beautiful part of personal development and getting to just continue your evolution, because even when you're willing to do the work, you're not necessarily ready to touch on the different subjects.
Mm-hmm.
You think you're ready, and you're like, no, you're not, because these things are still happening, and you're not ready because you're still like, there's a wall that's like a fortress that's like 30 feet thick. That shit is not moving. It's not ready.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So thank you so much for that. And what would be like one little thing a person could do to help themselves to start on that journey of working through codependency, for whoever is left watching? We have 3 people now.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, it's very nice. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, my brain is like, oh, which thing? So really, it's about self-care. It's about, in the moment, if you're realizing that you're going to give up something that you love, if you're going to give up something that's going to wreak havoc in your life, if you don't do it, like let's say you have to do your yoga, or you're just a train wreck for the rest of the day, but some friend calls at 8 o'clock in the morning and they're like, insert disaster in their personal life here. And you're like, you would have to ditch your yoga to do it. But if you ditch your yoga, it's going to be 3 days of hell for your family and your life, because you have to have it.
I wouldn't know anything about
be
what
able
you're
to help
talking
that
about right
friend
now.
in the emergency because you have to do your yoga, and you're not willing to put your entire life through 3 days of hell because you missed it. It's choices like that. And you'll fear that you're being an absolute bitch or asshole by saying no. But you can say, well, I can't come right now, but I can come in an hour and then I can help you. And so you're still helpful, but you're not dropping the thing that you have to have to function. No, I don't deeply believe in this at all.
Boundaries.
So that's self-care. It's doing the things that you know you must have to be able to be the best you.
Which in the end, everybody gets a better experience out of.
Right.
And also,
one of the women.
Huh?
Go ahead.
I was and so with it's just so much fun to get to laugh with you, my friend. It's just nice to spend quality time. So with boundaries, you have to have boundaries with yourself. You have to learn how to have boundaries with yourself first, and then you have boundaries with other people. And when you give people that space and those boundaries, which are healthy, then it gives them the autonomy to learn that you are not the only person in the entire world. It puts them in a position to expand their range and engage with different people in a healthy manner and create more of their support system, which is each individual's responsibility. You know, when a person is in a really dark and difficult space, then we can step in as like good human beings and help like lift them up. But then once we lift them up, we're like, here you go, here, little bird, go fly out of the nest, like have a great life. And you don't need to continue, because like as a life coach or a counselor, like you don't want somebody to come see you for forever. You want to give them the tools to succeed so they can move on with their life. So like, yeah, like it was great hanging out with you. Go do it.
Right.
Live your dreams.
If people
But
are
it's the same
worried,
thing
they're
with
like, "Oh, I'll
friends.
never see you again." No, just call me. Just call me
Yeah,
and give
like
me
it's
an
fine.
update.
Just call, like let me know how awesome you're doing. Share your
I
wins with
know.
me. But
Not like I'm gone
people,
forever.
and if somebody decides to not be friends with you because you had a healthy boundary, while you may miss them, it's okay. Because if that's where they're at in their life and that's the boundary they need to hit, that they will go find other people, and they will either come to the place of like reasoning or they won't. But you don't have to take that on. And if you're around somebody that doesn't appreciate you to the point that they have to disassociate with you because you weren't there at a drop of a hat to like meet their needs, then that's like, okay, it's okay. Love yourself enough to surround yourself with people who truly appreciate and value you, because you're worth it. Never forget that. So on that lovely note, that you're all worth it, and you're all worth fighting for yourself and for the right people that you're going to surround yourself with. I hope you all have a beautiful day. Vanessa, thank you so much for your time. It's been almost exactly 1 hour, 59 minutes.
We're that good.
We're just that good. So thank you, and enjoy the beautiful day before the weather goes through the roof. I hope and pray to God, my friend, that you have air conditioning at your house, because it's supposed to be like 96 degrees on Tuesday. And I'm like, whoa. Sorry, I know I was supposed to leave it on the nice note, but man, the 96 degrees, like that thought just came into my brain, and I was just like, praise God, I have air conditioning in my house. My heart like bleeds for any person that has to do like be in weather that's that hot without AC. Just it's too hot. Do you have AC at your house? Yes.
Oh yes.
Yes.
We put it in a year or two ago.
Oh, thank God. You know, because like in Washington State, see, it never used to get so hot, so we didn't used to like really need air conditioning in Western Washington.
Yeah.
And like you'd have a couple like hot sweltering days. Everybody just like go to the river, the lake, or like over to the Puget Sound. It was no big deal. But now.
Yeah, now it's really intense sometimes.
Intense
for us. Other people, it's probably like typical, but it's intense.
Yeah. The people like George in Colorado, he's just like, bah, it's like every day for us anymore. People in Australia, they're like 110, it's fine. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay. I'm going to stop the recording. So try to stop the live. Stop the live. Stop live stream. Hey, look, it's a button. I found a button, you guys. This is very exciting, this whole process of learning technology. Someday I'm gonna get on here and I'm not gonna be like shocked and amazed that I was like, oh, I found all the things. It was incredible. Look at that. Maybe next time we'll even be completely on time. Anyways, baby steps. Thank you. Okay.